Hey everyone, I want to tell you about something that I like. It's Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. First off, it's free, doesn't cost you a dime. In fact, it can make you money. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. In fact, some episodes of Nintendo Switchcraft have been completely made on my phone. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else where you would download a podcast. This one's huge. You don't need a minimum listenership in order to make money from your podcast. Anchor will sell the ads for you, you record the ones that you want, and they go on your podcast. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast but never known where to start, now you do. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today.
As Nintendo begins to take on new forms, it's important that we can measure how addictive they truly are.
Welcome back to Nintendo Switchcraft, everybody. Happy to have you here listening. Very, very much appreciated. If you didn't know, you can get all of these episodes without any ads in them by heading on over to patreon.com/runjumpstomp. Let's get started with, there's a couple things I want to talk about today. First off, I want to talk about the Switch OLED edition, which is on its way. I want to talk about the other Switches that you can, or Switch, however you want to pluralize it, that are already on the market. I want to talk about WarioWare, as well as Platinum Games, Star Fox, and Metroid Dread. So it seems like we got a pretty jam-packed episode today. I'm going to try as hard as I can to make it short, because as my sedimentology professor in college always told me, brevity is clarity. And now that I do podcasts, apparently I never listen to him. All right. Let's get started with this tweet from Nintendo Alerts, which is a French, verified on Twitter, a French Twitter account that has a pretty decent track record when it comes to predicting things that Nintendo is going to do, especially when it comes to like price changes, new devices, like that kind of stuff. And one of the things that they recently said is that the current middle Nintendo Switch, the one that I like to call vanilla with sprinkles, is going to get a price drop. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page with me, we've got the vanilla Switch, which was the launch Switch, HAC01. And then Nintendo released a new version of that Switch that had a slightly better battery life, which is why I call it vanilla with sprinkles. That one has a model number of HAC01-01. And then, of course, there is the Switch Lite and the upcoming Nintendo Switch OLED edition, which is going to be released on the same day as Metroid Dread, which we will talk about in a little bit. The vanilla with sprinkles version, HAC01-01, is apparently getting a €60 price drop. Now, I'm going to convert all of my prices to US dollars because that's where my brain is. But right now, you can get a Nintendo Switch, what's it called? HAC01-01. You can get one of those in Europe for €329.99, and apparently it's going to go down to €270. Now, I'm going to say that this is probably equivalent to a $50 price drop in the States, which, you know, that's where I live, so that's the pricing that I'm going to refer to. So I'm guessing that this means, if this is true, that we'll get a price drop from $300 or $299.99 down to $250. So that would put, it really is a weird pricing structure, in my opinion. Let's talk about the Switch Lite. The Switch Lite comes in at $200. And then for $50 more, you would be able to get the Nintendo Switch vanilla with sprinkles. And then for $100 more than that, you would be able to get the Switch OLED edition. Now, this pricing structure doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, first off, for Nintendo to announce the Switch OLED edition and then in a very, very short time later announce a price in the change of the Nintendo Switch, I feel like that's kind of weird. Like, you would think that they would make the announcements at the same time. However, at the same time, devil's advocate here, there were a lot of people who looked at the $50 extra for the OLED edition and they would say, well, is it worth the extra $50? Now, for me, if I don't have a Nintendo Switch and I have the choice to go up to the Nintendo Switch OLED edition for only $50 more, that's fine with me. Upgrading from another Switch, that doesn't make any sense to me for the OLED edition. I'm not saying that you're wrong if you do. It's just, for me, it doesn't make sense. And even though the price of the OLED edition is still sitting at $350, I feel like a lot of people would look at the now $100 price difference between vanilla with sprinkles and, I don't know, like hot fudge sundae of the OLED, and they would say, wow, it's $100 more. Like, it's not worth it at that point. Like, that's too much more, even though the price hasn't gone up. I don't know if I'm making sense with that, or if you can understand my point, because I'm struggling to find a way to put it into words. But I feel like that's absolutely a problem for Nintendo. Now, of course, Nintendo's not going to lower the price of the OLED edition. They just announced the OLED edition. They just announced its price. There's no way they're going to drop its price before it even comes out. They're not that reactive a company. And I know that there's a lot of people who, since the announcement of the Steam Deck, there's a lot of people who are like, well, wait a second. The Steam Deck is only $50 more than the OLED edition. Shouldn't Nintendo lower their price? Well, in my opinion, yes, they should. They should lower that price down to $300, lower the Switch vanilla with sprinkles down to $250, and lower the Switch Lite down to $150. That would really help them stay competitive. But Nintendo, like I said a few minutes ago, they've never been a super reactive company, which absolutely has bit them in the past. Look at the times when they have been reactive. The launch of the 3DS. The 3DS launched and it bombed because it was way too expensive. They lowered the price. They did the ambassador program, and it's one of their most popular systems of all time. But it bombed at first because it was just too expensive. They did not justify it to customers. I feel like Switch or Nintendo could have reacted, and it would definitely have helped sales for the OLED Switch. I foresee a lot of people looking at the OLED Switch and comparing it to the Steam Deck and saying, yeah, I think we're going to go with the Steam Deck. It's a bigger library. It's probably a more ergonomic device because, say what you want about the Switch, you got to have extra stuff to make it ergonomic, which is why I most of the time don't play in handheld mode. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about the Steam Deck. If you want that, check out my podcast about the Steam Deck, On Deck, which is in episode 5 is coming up shortly. But I feel like when you compare the Steam Deck to, say, the regular Switch at quite a bit cheaper, down to $250 all the way up to $400 for the Steam Deck, now you're making a really good argument for why somebody should go with a Nintendo device over a non-Nintendo device. I feel like the OLED model is just out there hanging in the wind, and Nintendo just did not see the Steam Deck coming, and that's not their fault. But I wish that they were being a little more reactive and lowered all of those prices just by $50. It would really keep them. It's not like they're not going to be relevant, but it would keep them more in the mind share, because come December, there's going to be a lot of people whose Nintendo Switches are collecting dust, at least until the next big Nintendo game comes out. All right, let's move on. I want to talk about big Nintendo games that are coming out. Last night, I was sitting on the couch up here in the Nerd Nest watching YouTube on the TV, and my wife walks in the room and sits down, and I was watching the latest ad, I guess, for Metroid Dread, the latest trailer. It was the gameplay trailer. It already, I'm recording this the next day, it already has 500,000 views on Nintendo's official site. So the hype for Metroid Dread is absolutely real. And I'm going to talk about Metroid Dread just a little bit, but first I want to talk about what my wife said to me. She sat down and she was looking at her phone, and she said, "Oh, there's a new WarioWare game coming out?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got a demo of it if you want to try it out." And she said, "Yeah, sure." So I turned on the Switch and booted up the demo. And I said, "By the way, it doesn't have motion controls. It's just button controls." And she said, "Well, you know, we had so much fun with it with the one on the Wii." And then we kind of reminisced a little bit about going to Best Buy and waiting outside in the cold in order to buy the Nintendo Wii, and then bringing it home and playing games like WarioWare, having an absolute blast with those with my wife and I and our eldest daughter, who's, you know, she's now graduated college, but at the time, you know, she was still, you know, a little munchkin. And we had so much fun with that game. So she played through a little bit of the demo. And then today I said, "Do you want me to pick up WarioWare for the Switch?" And she said, "Yeah, it'll be fun." And then I was surprised. I didn't realize this. It's only $50. So it's not even full game price, which I think is really good. So I ended up picking it up. It just finished downloading a little bit ago, and you know, I'll play it sometime this weekend or sometime this week. For those of you that don't know, I'm a school teacher and I am back at work full time right now. So the time that I have to sit down and play video games is limited at this point. But I'll play it sometime this week, and we'll report back, you know, later on in a future episode about it. In fact, I want to know what everybody listening to this, I want to know what you all think of WarioWare Get It Together on the Nintendo Switch. I want to know what you guys think of it. So tweet at me at RunJumpStomp. Let me know what you think of WarioWare Get It Together. Are you enjoying it? Do you wish it had motion controls? Who's your favorite character to play as? And if you've been out of the loop as far as WarioWare goes, it's micro games. Each game is like 5 to 10 seconds, and then like 3-second countdown, and then the next micro game. And generally, the way it plays is that you don't really play as a character. You just like do a thing. It's like do this thing. You figure it out as fast as you can, and then you try and accomplish that task. The way that WarioWare Get It Together is different is that you are actually controlling characters, and each character has different abilities, and so you have this combination of the randomness of the micro games and then the randomness of which character you are going to play as stacked on top of each other, which gives you way more randomness to play through. So who's your favorite character? What's your favorite micro game? Are you enjoying the game? Do you wish it had motion controls? These are the kinds of questions that I'm curious about. So tweet at me at RunJumpStomp on Twitter, and I will include your thoughts in the next episode of Nintendo Switchcraft now that the game is out. But, you know, I feel like I haven't bought a new game for my Nintendo Switch in a long time. And I know there's listeners who complain about that. They're like, you haven't been talking about as many games these days. And the reason is because there just hasn't been many games that have been interesting enough to me to want to spend the money on. Like, I don't have an unlimited source of money to throw at video games, so the early reviews of Mario Golf kind of scared me away, even though I was very, very excited for that. This one I ended up picking up because I feel like you can't go wrong with a WarioWare game. Although I never played WarioWare Gold on the 3DS because it was a 3DS game and I didn't want to play it on the 3DS. I wanted to play it on the Nintendo Switch. Anyway, I will talk more about this game in the future when I've had some time to actually sit down and enjoy it. Let's move on. I want to talk about a game that that I mentioned already, and that's Metroid Dread. Nintendo is really greasing the wheels for this game. Like I said, when my wife walked in and we started talking about WarioWare, I was watching the trailer for Metroid Dread, the newest gameplay trailer for Metroid Dread, and like I said, 500,000 views in less than a day already. Like, people are very, very excited for this, which is good. And I understand that Nintendo feels like they need to really grease the wheels for this game, because traditionally, Metroid games tend not to do super well sales-wise. They're always pretty well enjoyed, fairly well reviewed, but sales-wise, they tend not to really knock it out of the park, which I personally don't understand why they don't do super well, because it's definitely a franchise that has given us a lot of really, really high quality games, and I feel like it's it's a genre. The entire genre of Metroidvania games is named after Metroid and Castlevania. And the setting, the sci-fi setting, is very, very appealing. I don't understand why these games aren't more popular, and so I do understand why Nintendo is being so aggressive with the marketing for this game. I just wish that they were a little nicer about the spoilers. Like, they're spoiling a lot, and don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything in this episode. But they're spoiling bosses, they're spoiling mechanics, and they're spoiling a lot of stuff that would be really cool to find out when you're playing the game. Now, for me, as somebody who covers video games, obviously not professionally, but as like my main hobby, I talk about video games. I got to look at this stuff. And I see this stuff, and it doesn't super upset me when I get spoiled on seeing a certain boss in a game. But I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh, I didn't even know that they were making a new Metroid game. And then they click on it, and then they see something, and they're like, oh, wow, that thing's in there? Well, that's really cool. But part of me wishes that I didn't know that, so that I could be surprised when I opened the door and walked in and saw it, like that kind of thing. So I feel like Nintendo's in this weird double-edged sword where they have to promote it as much as they can, and by throwing certain things into the game, and like I said, I'm not going to tell you what I'm talking about, but by throwing certain things into the game, it's definitely going to hit with certain people. But I feel like the people who recognize these things are people who are going to buy the game anyway. And I don't feel like it's necessary to show those things. I feel like Nintendo could have done a better job with marketing this game and not spoiling things for people. Anyway, it comes out in less than a month. I'm incredibly hyped for it. I can't wait to get my hands on it and play it. I have not played a Metroid game in an exceedingly long time. Metroid Prime 3. I didn't play Samus Returns. I wanted to play Samus Returns, but it was on my 3DS, and every time I grab my 3DS and play it for roughly 5 minutes, I'm like, well, I'd rather play this on my Switch with better controls. With real sticks on like the Pro Controller. I don't like the stick that is on the 3DS. It's just not good. It's okay. It's decent, but it's not as good as what you could have. And for that game to come out on the 3DS when it could have come out on the Switch was really disappointing. Now, I do understand why Nintendo had that game come to the 3DS, because they had a much larger install base with the 3DS. They didn't know if the Switch was going to be a hit or not. And so they said, well, we want to put this game on a system where it's going to sell a lot more. The huge install base of the 3DS made it a very, very attractive place for them to put the latest Metroid game. And I was really, fingers crossed that they were going to bring this game to the Nintendo Switch. That didn't happen. And I'm very, very sad about that. Mostly because, they keep talking about how Metroid Dread is the culmination of the story of the 2D Metroid series, I would love to be able to sit down and play through all of the 2D Metroid games on my Nintendo Switch. You know, starting with Metroid, and then Super Metroid, Super Metroid, and then Samus Returns, although I think Samus Returns is technically chronologically comes before Super Metroid, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure. And then the GBA versions like Metroid Fusion and the other one, I can't remember the title of that one. All of these are precursors to Metroid Dread. And I really want to know the story so far, because like my experience with these games is so spread out that I don't remember anything. If anybody who's listened to my content for any length of time knows that I've got the memory of a goldfish. Like I just cannot remember things, especially things that are far apart from each other. And I want to know like the full story, and it would have been fantastic if throughout the beginning part of 2021 they let us play all of these games on the Nintendo Switch, because I think that there's going to be a lot of people who their very first Metroid experience, their very first time that they've ever played as Samus Aran, whose name I've been saying wrong my entire life. I always said Samus Aran, but it's Samus Aran according to this trailer. It's going to be their first experience, and they're not going to know the backstory. Now, I'm hoping that Nintendo does, and I'm pretty confident that they will. They'll do a good job telling us the backstory in a quick and succinct way, so that the people who've never jumped into Metroid before won't feel left out. But I also hope that for the super fans, like not me, but the super Metroid fans, not Super Metroid, but you know what I mean. Like the rabid fans of Metroid who consume all things, and, you know, they have fan fiction on the internet or whatever. I hope that they leave lots of little nuggets of Easter eggs in the game for them as well, that are just like every time we watch in my house, every time we watch a new Marvel thing, my wife and I sit down and we watch Screen Crush, where he finds all of the Easter eggs in the thing that we just watched and talks about them. And that's one of our favorite things to do. And I hope that this game is littered with that stuff, since it is supposed to be the culmination of the 2D Metroid story. I think that that's pretty exciting. I just wish that I had the ability to play all of the other 2D Metroid story on my Nintendo Switch. I think that that would be better. All right, the last thing that I want to talk about before I wrap up today's episode of Switchcraft is this really odd post over on Nintendo Life. So for those of you that don't know, Star Fox Zero was a game on the Wii U. Wii U sold abysmally, like less than 14 million consoles worldwide in the entire lifetime. And the head of Platinum Games, I'm probably going to get the pronunciation of this name wrong, Atsushi Inaba, they were interviewing over at Video Games Chronicle. And this is what they had to say about remaking the Wii U version of Star Fox, which is Star Fox Zero, for the Switch. Before I actually get to what they had to say, I will just remind everybody who doesn't know about Star Fox Zero that it was this really strange gameplay mechanic where you had what was on your TV, and then you had a different view of the game on your Wii U screen, and you used the motion controls of the Wii U screen in order to shoot at different things as you were flying around on your TV. I never played it. Because when I looked at that, I said, that doesn't look comfortable to play. It looked like a bad experience. And most people weren't too happy about it. Now, you could not remake that experience on the Switch. The Switch does not have a dual screen modality to it. So if Platinum Games were to remake Star Fox Zero on the Switch, in my opinion, it would probably be a better game. This being the opinion of somebody who is ignorant as to what the original game played like. So here's what Inaba said when talking to Video Game Chronicles. They said, "It's not cool that people aren't able to play older games because they're locked out of the platform. So, of course, if anything was possible, we'd like to bring over any of those older titles to newer platforms. It kind of depends what's in the realm of actual possibility. But yeah, if the chance came up, it's definitely something we'd like to think about. The important thing to remember here is that because it's Nintendo's intellectual property, the ideas are coming from Miyamoto-san himself. If the opportunity came up to bring Star Fox Zero to the Switch again, it would be more of a question of what he would like to do in that opportunity. And of course, we would respect that again. Now, I see a lot of people talking about, oh, I guess Platinum Games is probably working on this. That doesn't feel like that. It doesn't seem like that from this quote. A lot of people see the headline from Nintendo Life and it said Platinum would definitely port Star Fox Zero to Switch if given the opportunity. And then they assume that it's happening. And then, of course, they're disappointed if it doesn't. I would be very happy if it happened because that would mean I'd be able to play the game without the ridiculous mechanics that were shoehorned in order to make the Wii U unique. The Wii unique. In order to make the Wii U, like that experience, a unique one. And I'm all for unique gameplay experiences. But it looked like a bad experience. Just because something's unique doesn't mean it's a good experience. So I would be all for this, but I just don't see it happening. Like, they would really have to jump through hoops in order to remake the game so that it would work in a single screen system. Maybe it's possible. But just because you have Atsushi Inaba saying that they would do it if Nintendo said that they could do it, doesn't mean that Nintendo would ever allow them to do it. And honestly, they're really just responding to a question. So I think it would be awesome. I don't see it happening, and I think that that's a little sad. But I think it's also okay at the same time because that means we can move forward. Maybe instead of remaking Star Fox Zero into a single screen experience, maybe make Star Fox 1 or Star Fox Next or whatever it is that you want to call it. Or maybe make another F-Zero game where we had a lot of people talking about how you could have a new F-Zero game that was like in space or something. I remember reading something about that. Like a mixture between F-Zero and Star Fox. I cannot remember what that was, but I know that it was something that we were talking about a couple of years ago when the Switch first came out. Anyway, they also did talk a little bit about Bayonetta 3. They did say that they're very proud of what they have with Bayonetta 3 and they're ready to show it. So I do expect to hear some more about that game soon. I'm not particularly excited for it because I haven't played Bayonetta 1 and Bayonetta 2. Well, that's not true. I think I went to a friend's house once and I played Bayonetta 1 on their system, and it was a button masher, and I'm not good at button mashers, so it just did not appeal to me. But I know that there's a ton of people out there who love the Bayonetta series and have been very patiently waiting to hear more about Bayonetta 3. I think the first time that we heard about it was that, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think it was 2 years ago. Like right before the pandemic hit at the Christmas time E3. What the heck is that? The Game Awards, where they showed off the motorcycle in Breath of the Wild, and then they showed like I'm using air quotes that you can't see because this is a podcast, but I'm showing air quotes for the trailer for Bayonetta 3, where they just basically showed that they're working on it. And we haven't heard anything since. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Nintendo Switchcraft. I want to say thank you to everybody who supports over on Patreon, patreon.com/runjumpstomp. If you want to support, you head on over there and you can get all of my shows without any ads in them, or you can get access to these episodes early Thank you very much for listening. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Just a quick reminder, at Run Jump Stomp on Twitter. Let me know what you think of WarioWare. Let me know what you think of any of the stories that I told you about today. Thank you for listening. I will see you next time on Nintendo Switchcraft.
People in the industry say Nintendo simply has the best games.